The sprite render component can be used in many different ways, including the creation of planets, the players in the scene, and the mountains to show the player's environment, and much more. I will teach you guys the basics on how to use it. Understanding the basics of Unity's 2D sprite rendering component can be really hard, but I'll be showing you guys the basics of Unity's rendering component. Okay, so let's first start to import our environment. Let's go to our scenes folder and let's double click on our main scene. This would show up our current environment. Let's import our character from our sprites folder by dragging in our astronaut here. Then it will prompt us to create a new animation. So let's go back to our assets folder and let's go to our animations folder. Let's replace our current animation for our character and let's press save. So as you can see, our astronaut is actually a little too small. So let's resize that to 9 by 9. There we go. So let's place our astronaut here on the bottom left. But as you guys can see, we can't really see our astronaut, can't we? Because our order in our layer is actually on 0. So let's change that into number 2. Let's place our character right here on the bottom left and let's change our name into astronaut. You could also do this by right click on your hierarchy, pressing 2D object and pressing sprite. Let's drag in our astronaut here on our sprites area. Let's change our scale to 9 by 9 and let's place this astronaut right here on the other side. But as you can see, the foot is actually behind our current platform. So let's change our order layer to number 2. Let's change our name into enemy. So we created our astronaut and our enemy sprite. Now let's add in a reset button on the bottom left. But as you guys can see, again, you can't really see the reset button on the front of this platform. So let's change that into the second layer. And let's resize this to be a little bit more smaller while pressing shift so it will be perfect. Let's place that on our bottom left of our screen so we could easily click it while we're playing later on. 2D sprite rendering is very similar to 3D mesh rendering. The difference is that the sprite rendering is shown in a 2D plane and the mesh rendering is shown in a 3D plane. Assets are different 2D art or paintings that artists design just like these. Now let's talk about our sprite variable. It's basically an area wherein you drag your sprite for the game to render. But if we change our sprite here, this will be the one who's going to be rendered. As you guys can see, our bird sprite is actually the one who is being rendered in our game. So let's go back to our astronaut and let's place that back. So you guys can see we got our astronaut back. Next, let's talk about our color variable. Let's go to our enemy and let's change our color to color red so we could distinctly figure out which one is our enemy. This can also be used in many different ways, like changing the tint of your friends, or if your enemies are getting hit, you can also use it when clicking buttons like this reset button by changing the code like this. Let's first create our C# script by right-clicking on our projects area, clicking on create and pressing C# script. Let's change this name into mouse. Click. There we go. Let's open up our script by double clicking on it and then Visual Studio will be launched, as you guys can see. Let's first remove the two using tags right here and let's remove our update function. Let's also remove this start comment right here and let's start by adding in our current sprite renderer component. And let's name it button. Now this will be referencing our current button on the game object. Let's go to our start and let's reference our button to equal to this current game object to get the component of our sprite renderer. Let's close that and let's create a on mouse down function and let's type in button dot color equals to color green when this is actually clicked, and if the mouse is lifted, let's create a on mouse up function. Let's create a button dot color equals to color dot yellow, so it would return to its current color, or you could also change this color to white. There we go. So let's press save, and then this is our current script for our button. This can also be used in triggers or mouse clicks, but you have to add a collider on your current button. So let's add in a box to the collider on our reset button, so we could change the color of this reset button by clicking on it. This can be changed by adding in a script on our scripts folder and dragging in our mouse click script on our reset button. So when we press play, this should be able to actually change color, as you guys can see. Now let's talk about our flip variable. It's a way for your character to turn from left to right and upside down or right side up. This can be used if you want to create your enemy looking at you, or if you want your astronaut to have an anti-gravity effect, just like this. So let's place our astronaut on this planet right here to give it a more of a anti-gravity effect. Next is our draw mode variable. There are 3 different settings for this variable, either simple, sliced, or tiled. So the most basic setting is the simple setting, wherein it renders your character on the screen. The slice mode is the pizza cutter mode. So let's use that slice mode on our reset button. Now, if we rescale our reset button, you will see a small difference. As you guys can see, it is better looking now and it doesn't stretch like a pizza. But if we go to a simple setting, it can stretch like a pancake. There we go. You see the difference there? Let's go to sliced again. And then, as you guys can see, the edges are not being changed, but only the center. Okay, let's go back to our old reset area right here. You could also change the width or the height of your button on this area right here. As you guys can see, our reset button is actually getting changed or resized using these 2 variables, the width and the height. The tile mode is a way for your render to repeat the same sprite over and over again, just like this. As you guys can see, if we resize our reset button, it will be resized accordingly. It will be like a tile. But if we change our tile mode to adaptive, it will only resize if it actually reaches a certain point, as you guys can see. But let's return that to our normal reset button. Those are the 3 settings on the draw mode. The mass interaction is a way for the buttons to actually interact with different environments that has a mask. This can be useful if you want certain aspects of your game to be seen on other game objects but not on other game objects. It has two settings, either visible inside or visible outside the mask. So let's try it out. So let's bring our current reset button and let's drag it in. We could change it up to visible inside the mask. As you guys can see, it's actually behind the mask of our current platform or outside the mask. There we go. So you could actually see the button behind the mask of our platform. The sprite sort point of the sprite is where they will be sorted. As you guys can see, we have two settings here. It's either center or pivot. So the pivot area is actually the area wherein your sprite is gonna be layered from. So let's check our astronaut right here and let's go to sprite editor. As you guys can see, here is our pivot point. You could easily change this by clicking it and placing it on the bottom left, so it will be easier for you to actually organize that certain astronaut. But we want to set our astronaut to be on the center, so it will be easier for the astronaut to be animated. So let's close that sprite editor again and let's press revert, so it will be back where it was before. The material variable is actually the variable wherein your character or your astronaut can change materials based on this setting right here. So let's add a material in our materials folder and let's change that color into yellow. So our current astronaut can change into color yellow. But as you guys can see, it is actually not here. The reason being is that this is actually the material that your current renderer will be rendering from. So let's change our material back to sprite material so we can actually see our astronaut back. It is highly suggested that you don't really touch this material right here unless you are rendering your current game in Universal Render Pipeline, because you could actually create different materials for your character to add a certain effect to it. So let's get more advanced. The first thing that you'll be seeing on the additional settings area is going to be the sorting layer. The current layer that you are actually looking at right now is going to be the default layer on our 2D game. We could easily add a new sorting layer by pressing add sorting layer, pressing the plus button, and let's rename this to players. There we go. Let's go back to our astronaut and let's change our layer to players. Now, it can be placed on any different layer, but if we change our enemy to players as well, and then let's deduct this to 1, in theory, if we go to our player right now, this will be in front of your current enemy. But if we change our enemy to 3 on the order of the layer, it will be in front of the player. This can be used in the different aspects of your game, like the mountains. As you guys can see, we could actually bring our mountains in front, like this, as you guys can see. But we want to bring it back. This can also be used in ordering your planets, just like this. As you guys can see, we could change our order to players, and let's set that order to be the first number right there, and then let's change our planet's location to be right beside our current planet. As you guys can see, it is actually in front of the planet right here. Let's go back to our default area and let's change the order in layer to 0. Oh, sorry, -2. So this planet is currently behind the first planet in front of it, as you guys can see. But let's change this order in layer to -5. So our second planet is actually in front of this main planet because it is actually behind the first planet in front of it, as you guys can see. But let's change this order in layer to -5. So our second planet is actually in front of this main planet because it is actually behind the first planet in front of it, as you guys can see. But let's change this order in layer to -5. So our second planet is actually in front it is actually ordered in the back of the second planet. So the order in layer is basically a paper stacked within each other. It can either be in front or the back of that current layer. The sorting layer is basically a folder wherein you collect all your papers and placing it in a certain folder. So those are the basic things that you have to know on our sprite renderer component, and you could actually use this in your game. Anyways guys, if you guys enjoyed the video today, hopefully I will see you guys on the next video. And if you guys have any more suggestions, I would love to hear it down below. And don't forget to join our Discord server. We have a beautiful community of game developers and Minecraft players as well. So if you guys want to join in, our Discord link is down below.